I don't know if you've been paying attention lately, but video has entered the chat for all kinds of content creators, podcasters especially, but really anyone who wants to be a content creator right now should be considering video. Even at podcast movement a few years back, all the hype was behind getting video on your content and why it was important to push that way. Now, we're not here for the whys behind that statement. For the next few, though, let's just imagine that you've already decided for some reason or another that you want to start video, either as an existing podcast, a new podcast, or you just want to be the next big YouTuber. What camera should be your first? And really, what are the differences between the cameras? Does it matter? Because if you were to Google search what camera you should use for content creation right now, you would be met with cameras anywhere from $500 all the way up to $3,500 and beyond that. Let's get started with my least preferred and build up to my most recommended. And first up, we have action cameras. These are great for a few reasons. First and foremost is price. Easily some of the cheapest options you can find in the market right now, and they have a lot of cool features that lend themselves to content creation, especially for moving shots. So if you're planning on doing the whole walk and talk thing, this might be your first stop. These things also have one of the lowest barriers to entry when you're considering the learning curve. Many are basic point and shoots, and while there are usually a ton of settings to get to know, a quick once-over on the manual and you should be pretty good. Next up is the resolution. This is the one area that these cameras really shine in. Even if you were to buy one of the older generations, the resolutions are well north of 4K. Like the GoPro Hero 9 released in 2020, sports resolutions up to 5K. Also, these cameras tend to have pretty decent colors as well as decent onboard mics. Probably the biggest feature for these cameras, though, is how portable they are. They're literally pocket cameras that can be taken anywhere without any fuss. However, there are some shortcomings to action cameras, especially as you look at the older versions. First up, you have field of view. Remember, a lot of these are meant to be action cameras, so they have really wide fields of view. That tends to lend itself to fisheye visuals. Now, newer models are getting a lot better at avoiding that or some sort of compensation, but the perspective can be annoying when you're trying to illustrate depth. Second, and probably my biggest pet peeve, is the ridiculous attachments that are needed for these things, which are all brand specific. Oh, sure, you want to mount that GoPro to some sort of non-GoPro tripod? Well, we're going to need an extra $20. And really, the ecosystem of add-ons becomes a bit predatory if you ask me. However, for some of the accessories, you can find Amazon versions, but with everything Amazon branded, your mileage might vary. And my third issue with these is the lack of depth in the shots. Now, this isn't the fault of the camera, really. It's something that isn't unique to action cameras either, but it is something you have to keep in mind if you want all that buttery smooth bokeh in the background. All that said, though, if you decide to go this route, make sure you do your homework and choose a brand that offers everything you need. For example, the Insta360 Ace lineup doesn't have HDMI support. And finally, even with the newer action cameras these days, low light support is always an issue. So you might find it struggles indoors if you don't have enough supporting light. And now we get into the standard, the kings of YouTube, the mirrorless and DSLR cameras for that professional look. And there's a lot to unpack here. These are the cameras that will give you the big boost in video quality and are basically the top of the heap for content creators. And that is because the choices literally go from entry level all the way up to cinema cameras that are listed on the approved list for Netflix show production, which means these are what you eventually want to shoot for, or if you have the money and the time to learn, your first stop. My first camera for YouTube was this, the Canon T7i, and with that, I got the ye old nifty 50. It wasn't an ideal YouTube setup, and my first upgrade was to this, the Sigma 18-35 f1.8. For the uninitiated, that's a really nice lens for this camera. All in all, though, for my first YouTube camera, it was only $750 for the body, and I believe it was $900 with a kit lens. And because I was a photographer prior, there wasn't much of a learning curve, other than the fact that I was moving over to Canon from Nikon. And the upgrade here over the action cameras, it's night and day. By far, these cameras have the best depth, the best color, and possibly the overall best image quality. I do say possibly because it is rather dependent on a few factors. These cameras also have the longest life in a content creator's studio, as they have multiple upgrade paths, and you'll be more likely to upgrade a part of the setup than the whole thing. And while these things are more expensive, I would argue that year over year and dollar for dollar, they actually end up costing less because they last longer and there's less pressure to upgrade on a yearly basis. But all those glorious positives do get met with some substantial drawbacks. I did mention price, and while it is affordable over the long term, the upfront cost of these cannot be ignored. Sure, you can get starter kits for around $700, but upgrades on the lens are going to start stretching your wallet out pretty quick, especially when you consider that the lens has more of an impact on the quality of the video than the camera itself, meaning you can drop a lot of money on lenses just looking for the right look. Secondly, mirrorless and DSLR start to get really expensive when you start to realize that they require more than just a camera. To get the best out of your video quality, you need light and lots of it. And like everything else, good lighting does come at a premium. And while it sounds silly, it really does make a difference. And finally, these setups tend to be big and bulky and heavy. When you start fleshing out your setup, you will find it's rather cumbersome to take out on the road. Not such a big deal when you have a static setup like me, but if you only have one camera, and it's a mirrorless or DSLR with a decent lens, these things can be kind of awkward to trek around with. And this is one of my most recommended to start with no matter what kind of content creator you are. And I know this isn't the most sexy option. I get that. But there's a ton of positives to using your phone and a lot less drawbacks than the last couple options. For starters, you already own one. Me, I'm rocking a base model Samsung S23, which makes this an almost 2-year-old phone. And yeah, it's not perfect and it probably lags behind the latest iPhone offerings. But is anyone going to notice? They're not. Also, as I mentioned, you already own this. So just imagine kicking off your career in content creation, and instead of going broke on cameras right off the mark, you can drop money into other things that are just as, if not more important, like audio. Perhaps getting something like the Rode Wireless Me setup, or maybe a ring light, at least. Little things like that can take your normal phone camera and just make it all the better. But it even goes further than that. Your phone can be your one-stop shop. It does both vertical and horizontal, and it can easily edit the video right on your phone and then just upload it. Honestly, if you're doing content for TikToks, Reels, or YouTube Shorts, it doesn't make any sense to start on anything else than your phone. Again, it's already in your pocket. And even if your phone is getting a bit long in the tooth, it's probably the most affordable upgrade to get you started in the world of content. Not many camera options have a monthly plan. As for the drawbacks, well, there are a couple here as well. While the video will be fantastic, it will still lack depth. However, that's something you just have to get used to until you upgrade to the DSLR or mirrorless. And probably the biggest issue is, well, it's your phone. More wear and tear, more usage means you might find yourself needing to replace it a bit more often. I mean, clearly it's user dependent, but logic does kind of dictate that the uptick in usage will have an impact on the phone. But maybe that just means you get to upgrade to the latest iPhone a bit earlier. Maybe it's a business expense. Let me know down below though, what kind of camera are you rocking? Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching.